everyone. Welcome to episode 239 of the Book Cougars, two middle-aged women on the hunt for a good read. I'm Emily.
And I'm Chris.
And we have a thank you to start with.
Yes, big thanks to Vicky, who's our newest Patreon member. Thank you so much for supporting our community. We really appreciate it.
So happy to have you. So we also have a follow-up from some of my comments that I made in episode 238 about God of the Woods, which I found a copy of at a little free library in Colorado and ended up leaving there because I couldn't fit it in my suitcase.
Right. And we were talking about how popular it was and what the waiting lists were at the library. And I think you said maybe that's calmed down.
Yeah, I'll just go get it from the library.
Go get it from the library. Yeah. So I checked our local library, and currently there are 86 copies with 24 people on hold for the hardcover. For the audiobook, there are 28 copies with 82 people on the wait list. And for the ebook, there are 38 copies with 185 people on the wait list. So it is still a popular book.
Yeah, so who has deep regret? Emily raises her hand. Chris's copy is out on loan. So, it'll be waiting for me there in Colorado the next time I go.
Yeah, or maybe next time I go to work. Somebody might be finished with it. We'll see. So, Emily, what are you currently reading?
So I started We Show What We Have Learned by Claire Beams, which actually was her debut, and it's a set of 9 short stories. And I think it's kind of unusual for an author to have a short story collection as their first book. Maybe that's changing. I don't know. Anyway, Claire is the one that we talked to on episode 238 about the garden. And had I started this collection, maybe I would have asked her that question. Too late now. But I started with the title story, We Show What We Have Learned. Ooh, it's a banger. It is about students in a 5th grade class. Their teacher is kind of shy and trying to teach them, as a teacher does. And parts of her body start to fall off.
Oh, God.
So I'm imagining that these stories might be slightly dark. I'm not going to spoil this one at all. When I tried to talk about short stories last year during my year of reading short stories, it's hard to talk about them because you can really spoil them. So I will just say that words matter. And Claire talked about that, how she can agonize over a sentence. And I can see that in her writing, that she's so precise. Just a great start. And the title story is in the middle of the collection, and I turned to it, which I was pretty proud of because I'm one that likes to start on page 1.
Nice. And those are interconnected stories, right? Set at a girls' school?
I don't know. That's interesting.
All right.
Well, maybe now I'm going to regret starting in the middle.
Well,
I'll go back to the beginning.
I think you should keep going with your rebel reading on this book and see what happens, because
why not?
Why not?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, and author Jung Yoon, when we said that we interviewed Claire, said that title story, We Show What We Have Learned, is one that she teaches to her students, which is why I turned to it immediately. Mm-hmm. Yeah, so I'm really looking forward to the other 8 stories. Again, it's called We Show What We Have Learned by Claire Beams.
Well, I've started 80 Days, Nellie Bly and Elizabeth Bisland's history-making race around the world. This is by Matthew Goodman. We've had Matthew on the podcast a couple times, and we'll link to those other episodes in the show notes. But this is, as the title says, the historic trip that these 2 women made. They're both reporters, writers, journalists. And Nellie Bly was the one who was going to do this around the world in 80 days. The inspiration was a Jules Verne story. And there's a map at the beginning of this book, which is always a good sign that it's going to be maybe a complex story, or visual aids would be very helpful. And in this case, Matthew does such a great job of setting up the people he's writing about and the scenes and everything. So it's not feeling like complicated in that way at all. I love the way he takes the time and attention to creating scenes and throwing in little historical tidbits that you don't really even need to mention. Like Nellie Bly at the very beginning is taking like a ferry to get to the ship that she's going to be boarding. And she's going across the North River which is what the Hudson River was called back then. You know, so like you learn these little tidbits as you're learning the larger historical story, which is super cool. So Nellie Bly went east from New York to go around the world. And there was pre-publicity about her journey. And this is for her newspaper that she was doing it. One of the competing newspapers thought, oh, wouldn't it be interesting if we sent somebody to do the same thing and have a bit of a race? It couldn't be a man because no one would have sympathy for a man trying to beat a woman back then anyway. So Elizabeth Bisland takes the westbound route and she leaves like the next day or maybe 2 days later. I mean, imagine that, right? You're doing your life. You have things set up. When her boss first approached her, she was like, well, no, I have people coming to tea tomorrow. can't just drop everything. But she does. She drops everything. And so that's where I am at this point, very early stages of the book. And I just can't wait, especially for the weekend to come, so I can just lay around and read this wonderful story. Again, 80 Days by Matthew Goodman.
I just started The Correspondent by Virginia Evans. This is a novel. It's a debut, and it's told in letters. It's an epistolary novel. I love when you first open the page to the title page, it's got handwriting, which makes you think about someone sitting and writing correspondence. The protagonist's name is Sybil Van Antwerp, and she starts by writing a letter to her brother to let her know what's going on in her life. It starts out in 2012, so we're not quite present day, but not too historical either. And just tells him about her daily life and that she had a little accident. And then the second or third letter is to Miss Ann Patchett, who's a very famous author and owns Parnassus Books. And she sends it, the address is to Parnassus, and is wishing to congratulate her on her novel State of Wonder, which is one of my favorite novels of Ann Patchett's, and then reminds her that she also wrote her about the novel Bel Canto and that Anne wrote her back and commended her on her penmanship. So I'm not far enough in to know, kind of what the point of the novel is, but I do love reading a book that takes place through letters. And good news for Virginia Evans, the author, the Center for Fiction just released their first novel award long list, and The Correspondent is on it.
Oh, congratulations to her for that. That's big.
And I'll put a link in the show notes to the long list for the Center for Fiction first novel, because if you're looking to grow your TBR and you are someone who likes reading debut fiction, it is a great resource. An overwhelming, but great resource. I want to say there's 35 books or something. I don't remember how many. It's a lot. So again, The Correspondent by Virginia Evans. This is the one I'm going to be laying around and reading all weekend.
So what have you just read? I know your list is a little bit bigger than mine this week, so you go first.
Or do you want to talk about our short story so we can get it over with?
Yeah, that might be a good idea. So those of you who've been reading along with us in the Penguin Book of Ghost Stories, you know that the next story is At the End of the Passage by Rudyard Kipling. This is the story we're going to discuss right now.
Yes.
Okay, one word response.
Oh, can I do two?
Sure.
Hated it.
Well, my one word response is boring.
Okay.
Yeah, that's a little harsh, I suppose, but so just a little background. This one came out in 1890. It was first published in the United States and then in the UK. First came out in a book collection, 1891. And it's set in India. And it involves these 4 white men who are there as part of the British Empire. And I think from the very beginning, that kind of had a different tone for me now than it would have when I was a child reading a story set in India with, more awareness of colonialism. So that didn't exactly make me have much sympathy towards any of these guys.
Right. And they're getting together and they're playing a game. They're playing whist, which was a common game back then. And they're hot And they're kind of bored of their lives too. You know, like they're trying to figure out how to get through the heat and their purpose there. And right away, like you said, the first couple of paragraphs, I was like, I'm just not really interested. So when I say hated it, which you said boring is harsh, like, maybe I should rethink my words. It's like the words were coming in and I both read it and listened to it several times. And they were just like their words were coming in and then they were just going out. I couldn't keep track. There was one sentence that made me think, oh, that's a cool sentence. You can't clean a pigsty with a pen dipped in rose water. I was like, that's a good sentence. I like that sentence.
Well, that's an interesting point because, I wonder if Kipling was just so steeped in the scene that he didn't realize he needed to describe things a little bit more for readers who may not be there. And maybe that wasn't the point. There's a scene where the characters are talking about how all the reportage back home in England is making it sound so like romantic and glorious and that all these white Englishmen living in India are living in the lap of luxury. When here they are, they're all at kind of like outposts. They're very sweaty. They're tired. There's no relief. The food lines and everything are slow and don't come consistently. So that sets things up for the issue of brain fever and how you sleep at night. This is kind of like the medical issue that we've seen in some other stories.
Right. And dreaming, you're dreaming. He ends up being under the haze of morphine. So what is he dreaming? I know I kept saying like, where's the ghost? Bring me some ghosty action here, you know?
And this was more, I would call it uncanny than like a ghost story. The one part I did like was when one of the guys goes and dismantles the other man's guns so he won't harm himself. And the other guy comes and laughs at him. It's like fighting ghosts with guns. Doesn't really work.
Right.
Yeah, I don't know that much about Kipling, really. So I don't know where this lands in his career. The only thing I do remember about him is I read one piece about how he was so gung-ho about World War I initially and then came very much to regret it because of the slaughter. And I think that happens so much with every generation or maybe past generations when war was glamorized more. Like they're saying, living in India is being glamorized at this point, but the reality is something completely different.
Right.
So what aspect you focus on a story can really make other people desire it. But then once they're there, they realize what a mistake it is.
Yeah. A reality check for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah. And he is well known for his novel, The Jungle Book. So if people recognize the name and can't place it, that is one of the novels he's well known for.
Yeah, and I didn't read that. I remember Rikki Tikki Tavi. That was one of my favorites, probably because it was a cartoon adaptation when I was really little. I remember the beat of that.
Yes.
Matching the movements of the story and stuff.
Yeah, I do remember that. That's a good one. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, so neither of us loved it.
Yeah.
Is a more gentle way of saying it. And what's up next, Chris?
Up next is a short one by someone, I haven't even heard of this writer. It is Nightmare Touch. That is a promising title. And it's by Lafcadio Hearn. I am not familiar with this writer. And it is a short one. It is just, a handful of pages. At the end of the passage wasn't very long, but it did take me 2 evenings of nighttime reading to get through it.
It wasn't long in pages, but it was long in feeling.
Now, that said, if you love this story, let us know. Like, what was it about it that you really were attracted to? Because we are not any authority on liking or disliking. We just have our personal preferences. And it also depends on when a story comes into your life. So we never want anybody to feel like, oh, maybe I shouldn't have liked that story.
Oh, for sure.
Yeah,
Yeah,
if you
no
liked
pressure
it,
at
you
all.
liked it. And we love to talk about. And I think that's what makes a good book club or any kind of literary discussion is when people disagree and have very different takes on things. It makes the literature come alive even more.
Absolutely. And a lot of it, as we know, has to do with when you're reading it, how you're reading it, and what you're bringing to the story from your own life. So we would love to hear from other people, please. Well, on the flip side, I read a novel that I hugged at the end and then in my book journal wrote, If I had to review it, I'd give it 5 million stars.
And she's still hugging it right now as she's talking.
For those of you who were listeners of Books on the Nightstand, the host, Michael Kindness, used to say that a book was clutch-worthy. And this one's definitely clutch-worthy. This one is called BUCKEYE by Patrick Ryan. It pubs on September 2nd, just around the corner. It is an epic novel about a young man who's born in Beinecke, Ohio, in the Midwest, and he's born with one leg shorter than the other, which impacts his life, and part of the reason why he ends up staying there when a lot of men are going off to war in his generation as he grows up into a teenager and young adult. And it broke me. That's the word I wrote here. Broke me. Beautiful storytelling. One of the things I also liked in this novel was the use of letters. Cal's father, who was a World War I veteran, continues to write letters to the government, which is a great part of the novel also because he has a lot of strong opinions. So I really enjoyed that part of it. And I think the thing that I appreciated the most about Patrick Ryan's writing and his storytelling was the truth of relationships. You know, if you live long enough, relationships don't always go in the directions that you thought they would. People who become in-laws with each other sometimes stay in-laws even if the original relationship disintegrates. You know, you might get divorced but still be best friends with your father-in-law or your mother-in-law or your sister-in-law. You know, relationships are messy and not clean, and he does a wonderful job with that in this novel. There's also a woman who communicates with the spirit world, so I can also use this for my ghost story bingo card.
Nice.
I was really surprised. It's also a big book, so I checked off another mark in my summer reading. And the other thing I wanted to talk about is Chris was asking me on one of our BookTube videos, she said, where does the title Buckeye come from? No, I think you asked me, why is Ohio called the Buckeye State? And much to my now deceased father's chagrin, who was a botanist, I said, well, you know, because buckeyes come off chestnut trees, is I believe what I said, which is not true. Buckeyes come off buckeye trees because I looked it up after.
Oh, interesting.
Buckeyes look like chestnuts, but they are actually two different trees.
Interesting. Yeah, I mean, it made sense to me when you were saying that because we had a chestnut tree in our yard growing up, but it's like, oh, yeah, that could look like a buckeye.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But sometimes we say things that aren't true that we say with authority. So I was embarrassed by that afterwards because I thought, well, my father would have laughed because he always referred to me as the daughter with the purple thumb, not the green thumb. So I cannot recommend this novel highly enough. If you love an epic novel that crosses generations and relationships and has a little bit of the spirit world, Buckeye by Patrick Ryan.
Very cool. Oh, another big book. So I did finish Somewhere on the Lakes in 1843 by Margaret Fuller. Had a wonderful conversation with some friends who've all signed up to discuss the new Library of America edition of her collected writings. And so we started with Somewhere on the Lakes. And it's one I had read a long time ago, probably like 30 years ago. And it was really fun to revisit it because I remembered some things. I remembered the general feeling and maybe a general outline, but none of the details for the most part, other than a couple stories here and there. So it is about Margaret Fuller's actual trip that she took from New York to the Great Lakes by steamship in 1843. And then some land travel that she did. She was in Chicago and a group took like a wagon trip down into Illinois, like a 2 or 3 week trip. And then she was on Mackinac Island for a while. And so what's really interesting to me about all this is the travel and what she sees along the way. And a big part of what she writes about is the Native American people who at this time are actively being displaced. There's been a lot of wars and, they're actively being displaced. And on Mackinac Island, there's a scene where a group of Native Americans are coming and she sees them come on their canoes and watches them set up camp on the shore. And it's all done like within 20 minutes. And then she goes down and talks with them throughout her stay there. And some of the other white women are kind of horrified that she goes, because they're considered, quote, savages, to use that term, dirty, smelly, their food smells, according to these other women. But Margaret is curious and, she likes people and wants to know and goes and talks with them. And, she observes them. One of the stereotypes she wrote against is the stereotype of the taciturn, stern, male Native American man. But here she is being able to observe them from her hotel window, like playing with their kids and laughing with their wives and everything, which is wonderful. And then towards the end, then when they're packing up and leaving, they pack up 20 minutes again and they're gone. But what was surprising is Margaret happens to mention the debris they left behind. And we still have this stereotype, I think, that's alive and well among a lot of white European Americans, that the whole leave no trace, that the Native American peoples never impacted the land. And we know that's not true anymore for the most part. But I just think it's amazing that there she was witnessing this huge transformative time in American history and involving different peoples. She also talks about some of the immigrants that are coming in to settle the Midwest. She has these little, they're not diatribes, but she has the insertion of different stories because as she's going along, things remind her of something. And so you have stories that sometimes feel a little not related. Like there's this one about Mariana that everyone enjoyed reading, and it's partially biographical maybe, where there's a younger girl who comes to this boarding school for girls, and there's an older girl that she really kind of latches onto and wants to befriend, who's very sensitive and kind, and the other girls basically destroy her, bullying and whatnot. It's a very sad story. And then she also is a huge reader, Margaret Fuller. She's the first woman allowed to read at Harvard College Library. And so she had read all of these travel accounts to what was then the West. We consider it now the Midwest or the Great Lakes. And so she brings in a lot of this knowledge and compares different travel writers who came before her and kind of critiques them in some ways. And then there's some philosophical conversation, so much of everything, even poetry. And the poetry's not my cup of tea at all. It bogged me down after a while, some of the poetry. So I tried to think about it as like musical theater, right? You're watching a musical and everyone's talking and moving about, and all of a sudden they break into song. So I tried to look at Margaret's poems like that, because that's what she does. She's like, this is so beautiful. Illinois is the most gorgeous landscape with all these beautiful flowers. And then she bursts into this poem. So nobody in the group really enjoyed the poetry. At least one person enjoyed the philosophical stuff. That was Karen. And everyone really loved the travel stuff, I think, because, we're all so curious about the past. And I definitely wanted more.
Of the travel part.
Of the travel part, yeah. And one thing, I think Colleen might have mentioned this, that when she first gets to Chicago, she doesn't like Chicago. It's all utilitarian. It's people moving stuff. They're just busy business. But then afterwards, when she comes back again, she starts appreciating things more. And that happens, I think, in the prairies as well initially. Like when you encounter a new landscape, sometimes you don't really appreciate it at first because it's not what you're used to, or you've never seen a landscape like that. But by spending time in it, she grows to appreciate it and understand it. Yeah. Which is just beautiful.
And is she just doing this writing? Or because she was a reporter also in part of her life, right?
Yeah.
So did she do any reporting on this trip?
I don't think so. I think this is what led her to become a reporter.
Okay.
Yeah. If my chronology is correct in my brain at this point, I think this led to that. This is all part of a summer-long reading group that we're doing. And so for the next session that we have, August 16th, we're reading her short published works set in New England, her short published works from New York, the preface to Women in the 19th Century, her journals from certain time periods, and then letters. And then in September, we're reading her dispatches from Europe. I think she became a reporter after this because Greeley saw the book and really liked it. Plus, she was, already one of the major transcendentalists of the time period. So she was a known person by this time for sure. But this was her first book. So more to come on that. And you know what? If anyone is reading along who doesn't want to join the Zooms or whatever, we can put the upcoming reading schedule in the show notes if you're interested in reading things the way we plan on reading. And then you're always welcome to come and discuss as well. Just send us an email, bookcougars@gmail.com. So again, that was Summer on the Lakes in 1843 by Margaret Fuller.
I'm so glad that you have companions reading along with you on that.
Oh my gosh. Yeah.
I know you put it off for a year and it was worth it.
Yeah, so enjoyable to have people to talk about it and to ask what people thought. Because, sometimes you think, am I just not reading this well? Am I not focusing enough? Or, something you think is funny, other people might not.
Right.
I don't know.
So I finished BUCKEYE, which was a big book, and then picked up a very short book. And this was kind of an impulse. When I was at the library, it was on one of those shelves that was a staff favorite, and it's called NANAVILLE by Anna Quindlen, Adventures in Grandparenting. And Anna Quindlen is one of my favorite authors. I remember when this came out in 2019, and I want to read everything by her, but I thought, I'm not a grandparent. I'm not really into this. And lo and behold, 2024 and 2025, I became a grandparent twice over. So I picked it up, and it's a book of essays, and she's really just talking about her experience in becoming a grandparent. So the experience of spending time with her grandson, but also watching her son become a father, which I have to say has been one of the greatest joys for me, watching both my children become parents. I had never really thought about that. I'd thought about spending time with the grandkids. And my favorite essay, because for those of you who don't know Anna Quindlen well, a big period of her life was spent not just writing novels, but writing opinion pieces in Newsweek.
Yeah, I used to love reading those.
I loved them so much. And so one of my favorite essays is when she has given her opinion to her son and daughter-in-law about something to do with her grandson, and they weren't really interested in her opinion. And she's walking with her best friend that she walks with every morning, who turned to her and said, well, did they ask your opinion? And she's like guffawed, like it had not occurred to her that she wouldn't give her opinion. So she learned a very valuable lesson, which I have too learned, that I now say, like, do you want my opinion? About many things. I say that to my adult children now, but particularly when it comes to my grandchildren, because, lots of times they don't, is the answer to that question. So it's classic Anna Quindlen style. I love her writing. It's very fun and easy to read. My one disappointment, I have to say, is that the audio, which I thought would be really fun to get out, is not her. It's narrated by somebody else, and I thought it'd be really fun to have, because I love Anna Quindlen's voice. I thought it'd be really fun to have her, voice in my ears. But I read it, and it was a quick book and really fun.
Nice.
Again, NANAVILLE, Adventures in Grandparenting, Anna Quindlen. And that one was readily available at the library, which is nice.
Well, I read a new book. It's a historical young adult fiction, The Belgian Girls by Kathryn J Atwood. And I really enjoyed this story. It is about two young women in different time periods. So one is World War II, Julian, and then the other is World War I, Gabrielle, or Gabby is her name. And I didn't notice this with the book, but I also got a copy for my e-reader. And the e-reader had a table of contents, which pointed out, and I think I started with that because I noticed right away that the first two chapters were about one character, and then the third and fourth were about the other character, as opposed to going back and forth right away. I felt like having two chapters about one character helped get them in my mind a little bit better, and then the next two chapters about the other person, and then after that it was alternating chapters with their stories in these different times, but the same place for the most part, Brussels, Belgium. There are scenes set other places as well. But I like that a lot because you and I have talked about sometimes these novels that go back and forth, it can be hard to have the characters situated in their time period where they need to be or their location. So that was a good idea on Atwood's part. And so note to all you writers out there who are writing dual timeline, it might be a good technique to try again. So it is young adults. So in some ways, the story is a little bit more simplified than it would be for an adult novel. Like the Germans are all really nasty, disgusting pigs. I mean, there might be one that's a little bit okay towards the end, but these are young women who are battling for their country. The Nazis and then the Germans in World War II have invaded. They're the occupying force. They're brutalizing the population. I guess I'm just more used to adult fiction that might have a little bit more subtleties with that. So I've thought a lot about it, and I thought I'd mention it just for that sake, but I think it has a lot to do with it being young adult, and that the two main characters are young women from Belgium who are fighting for their country and spying, basically, and learning from one another. It's really great because whether you're young or old, people don't sometimes think they have courage to do things, or they'd never be able to do something. And you see one of the characters grow into doing something because of her love of her country and her people, basically. And I think that really resonates. And then there's one quote that I've been thinking about a lot. It's after the war. And this is something that we've read in books by like James Benn. So like French women after the war are brutalized by their own country people for having been in relationships with German men, sometimes against their will, sometimes to survive. And there is a scene where something like that happens in this book with a woman from Brussels. And one of the characters says to another, "What is stronger than rage?" And the character says, "What could possibly be stronger?" And the other one says, "Love. Love can harness rage and make sense of it. When you focus on what you love rather than what you hate, your anger can find a purpose, a way forward. Only with love can you rescue what is good from evil." And I really appreciated that. It made me think of the words of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. And it's sentiments that I believe. It's hard to hold, though, when you're going through trying times. But I really appreciated how everything worked out with this novel. And she also mentioned some historic people who were actually alive, like Edith Cavell, the nurse who was executed by the Germans. And there is a bookshop that plays a central role in this as well, which is always good. And the bookstore, my French, I do not have French language skills at all, but it's Le Chat Noir, the black cat. And it's like, oh, the black cat, because there's that famous poster, because they were like a cabaret troupe, I think, actually. So this is a made-up bookstore with that name. But I always appreciate a bookstore in historical fiction because they've always been such centers of knowledge and information. So I highly recommend it. The Belgian Girls, Kathryn J Atwood. I also have appreciated her nonfiction for young adults. They focus on women who have done courageous things in different wars. So check her work out if you were looking for some young adult fiction or nonfiction, or need gifts for people of a certain age.
Well, speaking of courageous women, I finished a book that I consumed only by audio called How to Say Babylon by Safiya Sinclair. When this book came out a couple years ago, I really wanted to get my hands on it and didn't. And then a friend of mine was asking for audiobook recommendations for a long drive. And I said, well, here's a list that I would recommend that I've listened to. And then here's the one that's at the top of my list that I haven't gotten to. And it was How to Say Babylon. And then she listened to it. And I had such green-eyed envy when she reported that it was good that I got myself a copy. Safiya Sinclair was raised in Jamaica in a Rastafarian family. The first thing that happened to me in listening to this book is I realized, I don't really know much about Rastafarianism other than the music and Bob Marley and dreadlocks and marijuana. It was really all I could say that I knew about it. And so she really starts by explaining what it is. And I was shocked at the similarities to Orthodox Judaism and really religion in general, So her parents both become involved in Rastafarianism and then raise their 4 children to follow that. And part of what it is about is growing your hair very long and then working against the beliefs of Babylon, which for them in a lot of ways is represented by the white man and what the white man wants, including the way they look at money and power. So Safiya is raised, it starts out, it's a very loving family, but as her father, who's trying to make a living as a musician, as his career is not doing well, and he becomes more engaged in Rastafarianism, which is very restrictive for the women in their families, things in their family start to unravel. And content warning, there is some real child abuse in this novel that was hard to listen to. And Safiya is the oldest child in the family and very smart and gets the opportunity to go to not a boarding school, just a higher level school, I should say. And she discovers poetry and writing, and poetry really saves her life on many levels. And she gets to come to the United States and pursue an MFA degree, and then I think eventually maybe even a PhD, and has had some poetry collections published that have achieved great fame. And then also this memoir, How to Say Babylon, which came out a couple of years ago. I really enjoyed it. She narrates it and does a fantastic job. I do find her poetry inaccessible for me. At the very end of the memoir, she does read a poem that she wrote in regards to her father, who she has a very difficult relationship with. That was accessible, and hearing her read it, I was like, oh, that makes sense. And it's about her daddy, and it's a reflection on Sylvia Plath, who has a poem also called Daddy. Reflection might not be the right word, a response, maybe her own response. I really enjoyed it. I recommend it. I would say content warning for the abuse. And also the fact that she reconciles, in her own way, reconciles with her father. I had really mixed feelings about that. Like, I have a lot of respect for people who can do that, but also question it at the same time.
Oh, yeah. I do, too. Like, I often think of, like, Pat Conroy and his father reconciling, and I just, I don't know.
Yeah.
Well, you know, we're all different human beings, and circumstances and relationships are messy, as you've said. I don't know. I think there are some things that are unforgivable.
Yeah, and I think you have to reconcile, but whether you have to reconcile and maintain a relationship are two different things, right?
Absolutely.
You have to reconcile the relationship in your mind and be able to move forward and all of that. But an actual reconciliation with the person is different. So I'm sure it's still a work in progress. I mean, she's not an old woman. She's still very young.
Yeah, I'm glad you read this, because I think I attended an event with her some years ago, one of those editors' buzz panels, and I was intrigued by her story.
You did. I remember that. Yeah. And one of the things that happens in the memoir is she ends up cutting off her dreadlocks, which is a really bold move. And that is a theme in the memoir, as other members of her family do the same. And you might imagine her father doesn't take that behavior well.
Yeah.
So,
right.
You know, a woman raised in a very strict, devout situation that takes her power.
Yeah, patriarchal. Sounds like. I mean,
very.
You know, and that is a good warning about what other cultures take from a culture that they celebrate or assimilate. There could be a lot more behind that.
Yes, for sure. And women's hair seemingly represents a lot.
Oh.
Yeah. How to Say Babylon, Safiya Sinclair. The other book I finished was another big book, Rebecca.
I'm clapping, and I can't wait to hear what you think.
This is by Daphne du Maurier. Chris and I had a little over-the-fence chat about this where I said, you know, I've been really impressed that when I mentioned that I was going to read this novel, you didn't say anything to me about it. Like, she has been completely mum, and she has read it. And then when I started reading it, and then when I finished it, I was like, oh my God, I totally know why she didn't say anything to me about this. But before I talk about it, I'm going to ask if you enjoyed this novel.
I remember enjoying it, but being frustrated a little bit. And I think, that's intentional. Yeah.
Yeah.
Because you feel what the main character feels, who's unnamed.
Yes. It published in 1938. This was not Daphne du Maurier's first novel, but it was her most popular novel. It sold 3 million copies between 1938 and 1965. and it won the National Book Award, which is interesting. I picked this up in a little free library in Brantford. I was very excited. It has a very cool cover with a big blue R, which I now understand more. I don't usually check the inside of books when I pick them up from little free libraries. And as I started to read, I noticed that the prior owner did write in the book, which was funny to me because I got to page 7, which isn't very far in, and there's a couple sentences here, and part of it's underlined. We were saved a retreat into the past, and I had learnt my lesson. Read English news, yes, and English sport, politics, and pomposity, but in future, keep the things that hurt to myself alone. And the person underlined that and then wrote stupid. So I thought I might be in a little bit of trouble with like reading this novel with someone's commentary the whole way through, but it didn't last, but that was funny. But it is a book that is really hard to talk about because you do not want to spoil it.
Right.
Which is why Chris has remained mum the whole time and why I'm not going to spoil it here today, dear listeners. I will say that it is about a young woman who meets a man who is a widower when they are on the coast of Monte Carlo, and they end up together and then are haunted by Rebecca, who is his first wife. And they go back to Manderley, which is where he had been living with his first wife. I will say that there is a character named Mrs. Danvers, who is the woman who is running the house. And she reminded me so much of Mrs. Dudley in The Haunting of Hill House, which I thought was interesting. And Shirley Jackson and Daphne du Maurier were peers. They were writing around the same time. They were not friends. I did look it up. But I thought that was interesting. Definitely that, person in charge of the house that gives you a slight creep factor. Mrs. Danvers in Rebecca had a much bigger part than Mrs. Dudley had in The Haunting of Hill House.
That's a nice connection.
Oh, thank you. On page 175, so pretty deep into the book's over 400 pages, is the first time that Mrs. Danvers, the housekeeper, does kind of suggest that Rebecca may be a ghost and asks the unnamed narrator, who she's really effing with through the whole story, if she believes in ghosts. Dun, 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 dun. So that was an interesting point. The other thing I did want to talk about, since we just finished Claire Beam's novel, The Garden, and talked about it on the last episode, and have been reading these short stories in the Penguin Ghost Story collection, trying to figure out why we're reading them. There are often, things to do with nature. And this is a part that I'm just going to read a little paragraph where they are coming back to Manderley, which is the big estate where a lot of the novel takes place. And this is the unnamed narrator, her first time approaching. Suddenly, I saw a clearing in the dark drive ahead and a patch of sky. And in a moment, the dark trees had thinned, the nameless shrubs had disappeared, and on either side of us was a wall of color, blood red, reaching far above our heads. We were among the rhododendrons. There was something bewildering, even shocking, about the suddenness of their discovery. The woods had not prepared me for them. They startled me with their crimson faces, massed one upon the other in incredible profusion, showing no leaf, no twig, nothing but the slaughterhouse red, luscious and fantastic, unlike any rhododendron plant I had seen before. Oh, that is nice. A good paragraph. Oh, I just loved that paragraph so much.
Very cool. I like that too. It does make me think of Hill House as well.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah. And the garden, right? There are these mansions, these houses surrounded by the flora and fauna. And in the case of Rebecca, there's the sea also, the crashing sea. It was really good. I will say at page 270 in my copy, I wrote down in big letters, plot twist, exclamation point. And I was like, oh my gosh, this is why Chris you can't talk about this book unless someone has read it, unless you want to ruin it for them.
Right. And who wants to do that?
Right.
Yeah.
Exactly. And I also think, the main character, the unnamed character, is very young and is really struggling in herself. And the man, the the male character lead, Maxime, says some of the most heinous things to her. I was thinking, ooh, I bet Chris didn't like that. I mean, he treats her like such a little girl. It's horrible. And she does kind of come into her own as the story progresses. There were two things that didn't hold up because this pubbed in 1938. There's a masquerade ball and someone comes in blackface as a monkey. That was really bad. And then there's a man named Dan who is developmentally delayed, and they refer to him as the idiot the entire novel. And I was like, oh, that's not so good either. But, 1938, you have to be forgiving of some of that stuff.
Well, it was allowed to be published back then, and it was acceptable to be published back then,
right.
Even if some people historically disagreed with it back then.
Yes.
So, yeah.
Good point. Yeah. So some of you are reading along with me. There is a buddy read link on Goodreads. If you've been reading it and you're not on Goodreads and you want to email me about your thoughts, I'd love to hear them. bookcougars@gmail.com. Also, hats off to, I think it was Amanda, who suggested the Alexandra Okarma audiobook versus the one narrated by Massey. I listened to both narrators and did stick with Alexandra Okarma. It's just over 15 hours, and I definitely went back and forth with it.
Nice.
Yeah. Rebecca, Daphne du Maurier. Another square on my ghost story bingo card.
Awesome. Now, do you think you'll read another one by her?
I could see doing it. I mean, I liked her writing a lot. It was, even though I just read that paragraph that was very detailed that I enjoyed, I found her writing a little bit, like a lot of details about the activities that to me got a little bit too much. But I like her writing. Yeah. And I've looked around. I think you mentioned that there's another novel of hers you'd like to read.
Yeah. My Cousin Rachel is one that Simon of the Readers formerly had mentioned. I think it's his favorite. Like, he loves Rebecca, but I think he said he liked My Cousin Rachel a little bit more even.
And I'd like to read The Birds, which is a short story.
And I talked about that not too long ago. Yeah.
Yeah. So, yeah, I could definitely see reading more of her.
Yeah.
Interesting woman. Yeah. So, Chris, did you go on any Biblio adventures?
I sure did. I had that conversation with Margaret Fuller readers that I've already mentioned. There was also the Willa Cather group that met that Colleen is leading, and we discussed A Lost Lady, which everyone really enjoyed. A couple readers were like, it seems like every next Willa Cather novel is my favorite of hers. So that's really kind of fun.
That is fun.
Yeah. And that was a good conversation. The next one for that group is My Mortal Enemy, which is very short. It's, just past novella length. Maybe it was published as a standalone novel. And that is one that is not as well known as A Lost Lady. And I can't wait to read that one again because I'm not as familiar with it. I've read it a few times. It's like 80 pages. So, yeah. How about you?
Well, I watched the 1940 film adaptation of Rebecca, which won an Academy Award, and it was directed by Alfred Hitchcock and stars Joan Fontaine and Laurence Olivier. I watched on YouTube, so I'll put a link in the show notes. There were ads, but it wasn't too terrible. And it was really fun to watch it. I have to say, it is different. They changed the ending. The people who decided what was allowed in movies back then had some objections to some of the material, which I can't say because it would really spoil the plot. So that was interesting. I liked the way that Hitchcock, it was black and white, and I liked the way that he handled the sea. There were scenes of California. I read about that, but then because the novel is supposed to be taking place in England. And the mansion was pretty cool. I mean, I felt like he did a good job considering, what filmmaking was back then, and was pretty sincere to the novel until the ending. And the woman who plays the young woman, I read that they had the hardest time casting her, and she wasn't cast till 3 days before, Joan Fontaine. And some of her looks and stuff were a little funny and goofy, but really that's how the character was in the novel. She just was so unsure of herself, and then really kind of comes into her own a little bit as the novel goes. I enjoyed it. I was glad I watched it. It's just about 2 hours. It was a
Excellent.
fun couch biblio adventure after finishing over 400 pages.
Yeah. Well, we went on a joint Biblio adventure too. I think it was just after our last recording that we did. We went to the New Haven Free Public Library to celebrate the launch of their new memory lab. It's called the New Haven Memory Lab. And this is a partnership with the Beinecke's New Haven Community Archive Support Program and the New Haven Free Public Library. Really great. It's in their makerspace. When you first walk in on the main floor, you walk in and there's the circulation desk and then the new book displays. And if you take a right into that room is the makerspace where they have the really cool 3D printers and other hands-on type things. And this memory lab, they have an overhead scanner, a flatbed scanner, a scanner for doing slides, and what are those photographic strips called? My mind is not coming up with the word. Negatives. That's it. Yes, the slides and negatives. And so they offer quick hands-on training to get you up to speed to do your own recording or your own scanning of your personal archives or your business archives. They'll walk you and help you with it, or they'll train you and set you free if you want to, have privacy to scan what you want to scan. And then there's an option to share what you've scanned to become part of New Haven history, because they are making a big effort to preserve New Haven history. Or you can just keep your scans to yourself, which I thought was really lovely. That
should be a T-shirt. Keep your scans to yourself. That was really nice because, they were talking about the cloud, and I saw some people in the audience kind of get like, ooh, I don't know if I want my stuff in the cloud. But they made it really clear that they will train you so that if you have private documents or something that you don't necessarily want someone over your shoulder helping you with, you can do that. And then you can just put it on a thumb drive or on your personal computer and take it home.
Exactly. Yeah. And, a lot of people don't want their family pictures in the cloud.
Right.
So I look forward to seeing how this evolves. And, if you're in the area, if you're near New Haven, Connecticut, check it out. Help spread the word about this effort. I think it's really a fantastic community resource. And they also have archival starting kits for people. They're the classic gray archival boxes, with the metal edges. It's a legal size box that they give you with some acid-free folders and sleeves.
A pair of gloves
for handling photographs. A spatula, as they call it, to lift staples or scrape sticky things off. And that's really lovely. I mean, the equipment itself is pricey, and then those archival boxes are definitely not cheap. So yeah. I think it's a wonderful service that they're providing for people.
Yeah, and I know, from my own experience, my father had tons of slides, and we didn't know what to do with them when he passed away. So what a lovely resource to help people with some of that material you want to save, but you don't know how to preserve it.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, I know there's some services where you can box everything up and ship it and have them do it for you, and then they send it back. But this, it's not going to leave your side. Right. You take it in, you do it. You don't have to worry about anything getting lost.
Right.
So that was a lot of fun. I enjoyed that.
Yeah, that was really fun. And we did also have a nice lunch in downtown New Haven together, which we hadn't done in a long time. Mm-hmm. We went to Mecha Noodle Bar and had bao buns and other delicious things.
Yes.
Really nice.
The other Biblio adventure, I had a couple days in the archives at the New York Public Library, the big one there on Fifth Avenue. I had a really good time doing research, which I love.
Yeah, so cool.
Yeah. How about upcoming Johns? What's on your calendar?
I have 3 things on my calendar. The first thing is this weekend I'm leaving for the Gentleman Caller's birthday. It's a big number this year. So we're celebrating. We're going to visit his son in Madison, Wisconsin, and then his sister and brother-in-law in Minneapolis. And one of our listeners, Mary, had a while ago, maybe last summer, even the summer before, sent us a great list of a Midwest Biblio adventure she did, including a stop in Madison. Thank you, Mary. I dug that back out. And so I'm hoping to go see Mystery to Me bookstore, which she sent us a nice picture of herself standing there. And then Jim's sister, she and I have done a good bookstore crawl in Minneapolis before, There's so many great bookstores there, including Birch Bark Books, Louise Erdrich's bookstore. But she recommended we go to Majors and Quinn and Wild Rumpus. Those are two that we haven't been to. So I will be reporting back. I'm really excited I've never been to Madison, and I've always wanted to go there. And then Minneapolis, the last time I was there, was like, it's known as the land of 10,000 lakes, but I also thought it was the land of 10,000 little free libraries. There were so many good ones, so hopefully I'll come across some of those. And then when I return, we have a date on August 13th to head to Boston to go to the Isabella Stewart Gardner Museum, which I'm really excited about.
Yeah, me too. I can't wait to finally get there.
Yeah. And my upcoming read is to read Natalie Dykstra's Chasing Beauty, The Life of Isabella Stewart Gardner. I'm torn whether I bring it on the airplane with me or not because it is a big hardcover book, but I'm pretty determined to read the hardcover because it's got beautiful pictures. So it's not too heavy. I haven't decided. I'm bringing a rolling suitcase, so maybe I will. And then after that, on August 14th at R.J. Julia's, there's a conversation between Jessica Francis Kane with her new novel Fonseca in conversation with Janice Nomura. And that's at 6:30. I believe that's a Thursday.
Yeah, I would love to go to that, but I don't think I'll be able to.
Oh,
but,
right.
Yeah,
You'll be
so
in
it
the
is
archives.
a Thursday.
Yeah. Yeah, and Jessica let us know that this is a ghost story. It is a novel, but it is based on a true story about the author Penelope Fitzgerald.
Well, the only thing coming up on my list, other than the August 13th, is going back to the New York Public Library again for some more research. But I'm going to be meeting our friend Kate, who's going to come up from the Bronx and meet me at the Oyster Bar in Grand Central for dinner. So I'm really looking forward to that. We are going to have our conversation about Silas Marner.
You say Mariner, I say Marner.
By George Eliot. And thanks so much to Sue, who asked, okay, let me just read her comment. She says, I don't mean to be pedantic, but isn't the book Silas Marner? Maybe I'm wrong, but it sounds like you're saying Silas Mariner. As I said, I may be just hearing it wrong, but anyway, I love that book, and also The Mill on the Floss and Middlemarch. George Eliot definitely has a way with words. Yeah, Sue, and I don't, because I have been saying Mariner. I even write Mariner every time, even though I know it's Marner. I don't know.
Maybe you want to be a mariner.
I don't know. Maybe I think it's like the rhyme of the Ancient Mariner or something. I'm not sure what it is. But yeah, so it is Marner. And I love the book. I really enjoyed it. I also really love Middlemarch. And I have to say, the other day when I was going into our local library here in Guilford, when you first walk in through the back door, they have a bookshelf on one side that's free books that you can just take. On the right-hand side and on the left-hand side, they usually have free puzzles. And I always stop and I look. They had a copy of The Mill on the Floss right there. It was a nice, very gently used Penguin edition. And I said, if it's there when I come out, it was meant to be. Well, a couple hours later when I left, it was gone. So my loss on that. But The Mill on the Floss, I think, is the next one by George Eliot that I'm going to read. But yes, so the next Biblio adventure to New York will include the conversation of Silas Marner with Kate. It was one of our recent quarterly classic reads.
Talking over oysters, what could be better?
Yum, yum.
And Sue, you're not being pedantic. Thank you.
Yeah, no, thank you so much. I mean, I know I mispronounce things, and we definitely get things wrong. We should have a disclaimer.
Yes, like Buckeye trees are chestnut trees, for example. And Kate, who Chris's meeting says to us that she often is yelling at the podcast as she was because she was probably yelling at Chris. It's Marner, not Mariner.
Yes, probably. I'll have to ask her about that. That's too funny.
So what upcoming reads do you have?
Well, huge drum roll. I am so excited about this book. It doesn't come out until March 10th, 2026. It is Jung Yoon's new book, forthcoming book, I should say, All the World Can Hold. I am so thrilled that her next book is coming. I do have an advanced reader copy. I thanked her for giving me a birthday present because my birthday is March 10th. So that's how I'm taking this as a gift.
Yes, we know she was holding it specifically for that day.
Yeah, so I have to, I don't know. I mean, I want to start it right away.
I know. I have it on my e-reader also, and I thought that would be the perfect book for my flight. I actually think I read Oh Beautiful as an e-arc on a flight.
I think you did too.
Yeah.
So Oh Beautiful was her last novel, and then her first one was Shelter. We both loved both of her first two novels. That's how you say that.
Or we both loved her other two novels. Yeah.
All right.
We love her.
Yes, we do.
She has been a guest on the podcast before. We will put that episode link in the show notes. You know, before we mic'd up, we both said she is someone who we want more people to read her. Her novels are so good.
They are so good. So check them out if you haven't read Shelter or Oh Beautiful, and then pre-order All the World Can Hold. Let your library know about it. March 10th, 2026 will be here before we know it.
Indeed. So I have Fonseca by Jessica Francis Kane, and that book pubs on August 12th. And then I mentioned Chasing Beauty, The Life of Isabel Stewart Gardner by Natalie Dykstra. And then also coming up is our next read-along. That Zoom conversation is August 17th at 7 p.m. Eastern. So I'm definitely bringing The Yellow Wallpaper by Charlotte Perkins Gilman on my flight. That's a short story that we have a paper copy of. And then The Upstairs House by Julia R. Fine. The Upstairs House is the official third quarter read-along. The Yellow Wallpaper is the companion read.
Right. And if you haven't sent in your reservation for your spot to be held for the conversation, do email us at bookcougars@gmail.com.
Yes, we still have a few spots left.
I also wanted to give readers of Jane Austen a heads up if they haven't heard about this book. It is coming out November 4th, 2025. Ladies in Waiting, Jane Austen's Unsung Characters. This seems so cool. I haven't started it yet, but it is edited by Adriana Trigiani, or she does the introduction, and then she has a piece within here. The other writers who write a piece on a character from one of Jane Austen's novels who's not a main character are Diana Quincy, Karen Dukas, Eleanor Lipman, Nikki Payne, and Sarah McLean. On the cover, they have the names going around in a square. So there's also Audrey Bellezza, Emily Harding, and Eloisa James.
Two of the romance. Eloisa James and Sarah McLean are both romance writers.
Yeah. They talk about Mrs. Bates, the Bennets of Jane Street, Georgiana. Eloisa James's, the title of her piece is called Sense, Sensibility, and Snapdragons. I like that. The Elizas, Lydia's story, Lace and Larceny. And then Sarah McLean's piece is called The Triumph of Hetty Bates. So, yeah, really looking forward to this one. It's by Gallery Books. So thank you to them for sending us this advanced reader copy.
So coming up next is our conversation with Laura Thoma, a.k.a. Chris's wife.
Yes, we are talking with her today about her upcoming play, Letter to My Soul, directed by Kathryn J Atwood, which premieres at GreenStage Guilford Live Arts Festival on August 10th. So listen to that interview, and it has details about the festival itself. And we will put a link in the show notes, of course. Happy reading! We are thrilled to welcome back writer and theater maker Laura Thoma. Laura has been our guest on several past episodes, which we will link to in the show notes. Laura is an alum of the Kennedy Center Playwrights Intensive, the National Playwright Symposium, Pauling Theater Exchange Playwrights Residency, the Desert Playwrights Retreat, and the Outrage, a queer writer's residency. She's a Dramatists Guild Institute of Dramatic Writing graduate and co-founder of Shoreline Playwrights. Her work has been developed with various theaters and organizations, including the Bechdel Group, Legacy Theater, Cape May Stage, Odyssey Theater, Chestnut Street Playhouse, Marist College, Drama Works Theater Company, and the North American Cultural Laboratory. Laura recently received an Artists Award grant from the GreenStage Guilford Live Arts Festival to write a new play. This commissioned work, Letter to My Soul, will premiere at the festival on Sunday, August 10th at 7 p.m. Eastern Time. Laura, welcome back.
Thanks for having me.
We're so excited to have you here and to talk about this new play.
I'm excited to be here and to share about the play.
Tell us about the genesis of this, because it's a really interesting idea and how it came to reside in your head.
Absolutely. The longer version of this story is I really think it started over a decade ago when Chris and I lived in Illinois. And maybe you remember the small town. I don't. We were in some small town because we were going to see something painted on the side of the building that Chris wanted to see. So we were standing in this small town, and she was very excited about many things historically. And I was standing there just thinking, like, I so don't like history. And I've always kind of struggled. And I grew up in Norfolk and Virginia, and literally you can't step 10 feet with bumping into a historical marker. And I was like, is it just because I grew up there? And so every school trip, everything was about history. My mother was a history professor. My great aunt was a history professor. But in the end, the realization I had was that I didn't feel connected because I didn't see myself represented in history. And so that kind of started this longing to see myself and find myself in history. And then about a year and a half ago, I stumbled on Laura Thoma, which, yes, is my name. And she was a writer from the 1940s. I believe she was German, lived in Switzerland, and she was a lesbian, and she wrote all sorts of things, but was an activist. And that's why the play is named Letter to My Soul. When I found her, I just had this moment of like, oh my gosh. It felt like that connection. The Indigo Girls have a song called Virginia Woolf, where it says something about a telephone line through time, which is what it felt like, and then getting a letter to your soul. I was like, oh my gosh, there was somebody else before me, literally with my name. And she died the year after I was born. So I did have a moment, which is in the play, of like, am I her? Like, is this my second time? But yeah. And at the time, she wasn't translated. Somebody, a German scholar now, is beginning to translate her. So I'm excited to actually get to read her work. But that was the moment where I was like, this is what I want to write about, because I'm very much about writing about intergenerational. So I wanted to have a young person and that connection to somebody else before them.
So how did this become a play?
That's a very hard, interesting question. So I kind of had this idea and was thinking about it. And then GreenStage does, I think it's biannually that they offer the grants, that you can submit for the grants. So I was like, well, they really wanted new work. They didn't want anything that had been written before. So I hadn't written it. So I thought, what the heck? I will try to propose, even though I don't know what it is. I had no idea what it was. I knew I wanted it to be 2 people at the time. So that's what I proposed. And, you know, the whole grant application is very overwhelming for me and for most artists. And this one in particular, because they ask all sorts of things, which is where Emily got involved, because I was like, please help me. They want a budget. I don't know. I don't know what they want. So we worked on that. But it was interesting to try to propose a work without knowing what I really was going to write. I've never done that.
Yeah.
I really do want to learn more about what the grant writing experience was like for both of you, because, you know, you both kind of worked on this.
It was overwhelming for me. I mean, they were helpful in the sense, and you might remember, I don't totally remember, but they had a series of questions you had to answer, which was kind of helpful, like what you wanted the audience to get out of it. Like they asked specific enough questions that kind of helped me go, okay. Because I think I applied for one other grant, which was actually for a screenplay. So this was my first time. But you had to write about the project, even though you didn't know what it was going to be about, because you're proposing a new work. So you had to explain. I was like, a lot of times sitting at my desk going, like, I don't understand. Like, I don't know. I haven't written it. But they wanted, for their particular festival, it has to be at least, I think, an hour. It can be a little bit over, but not much. So it's not a total full-length play, but it's also not a short play. So that was an interesting thing, too, to kind of go like, okay, what is this length and how do I propose that? Then they asked for a budget. And honestly, I don't remember everything else. I would have to look it up.
You've kind of blocked some of that.
Yeah.
I have.
The process. To back up, I think it's important to just talk about the concept of developing something creative. You know, in the world of books, which we often interview authors sometimes get an advance to write a book. Typically, that's if you've had some success in the past. I mean, I'm not sure how often it is that a debut novelist would get an advance. But in the world of playwriting, I think there's more this term commission, that you might be commissioned to work on a piece, which helps you in the development period. A lot of artists, though, are not supported during this time.
Oh, 100%.
And so either you have a day job that's supporting your artistic endeavors, or you take the leap to work on something without it being commissioned and hoping that you can sell it in the future.
Oh,
right.
100%.
Yeah.
Most playwrights, there is no way we are paid for our time, period. Unless you're, a big playwright like somebody like Lauren Gunderson, who has theaters backing you and you're constantly producing work. And I would assume somehow that works out because you're being produced enough. But I mean, I'm taking a class right now, a submission class. And, other submissions, big submissions, they can take hours and hours and hours to write just a statement. And you have multiple ones to do for one submission. So there's that. And then even most commission works, and this is a commission work, but it's a little different than if a theater commissioned it, because then you would be probably paid more. This was a specific grant. And in that money, I have to choose to pay my actors and my stage manager and all the other artistic, my director. And, so I'm not really still getting paid for what I'm writing.
Right. Exactly. So this is a certain amount, a dollar amount.
Mm-hmm.
So when Laura approached me, what was fun for me is that I have, longtime listeners may know this, some don't, I have a background in reviewing grants. I'm often on the other side of the table because I work for funders. So I get to do the fun work of reading a grant, and then not usually the heavy lifting because there's a board that has to okay these and pass them through for funding, but I get to give my opinion, which I always enjoy giving.
Amazing.
And so Laura reached out to me and said, hey, I need to write this grant. Can you help? And one of the things that's really important when you're writing a grant is to not start in the middle of your story, which is where it's really helpful to have someone who doesn't know your story read it for you if you can before you submit. So that's what I was able to do for Laura. Is she sent me this information. Most grant applications now are online processes, which can be daunting in itself because everyone is different. Just like when you're submitting, every submission is different, and there's so much time that's taken remembering all your passwords for things, etc.
Absolutely.
But there was also a budget request for this, and that can be really daunting because, as Laura said, we knew that the dollar amount wasn't going to cover everything, but she needed to figure out who she was going to pay and how she was going to pay them and come up with a reasonable budget for those things. So when you're working on a grant, I just want to say this to the world, it is helpful to have someone who isn't as familiar with what you're doing read it, because so much of grant writing is about telling your story.
Yes.
And Laura is a storyteller, so she did a good job with that. But there were sometimes, I can ask a question. A lot of what happens for me in the grants I read is 3-letter acronym overwhelm, because people use acronyms that they know well and I don't. So just things like that. It's always important to just give all the details. So Laura did a great job with that. And then we went back and forth on the budgets.
Yes. And I wouldn't have been able to do it without you, honestly. And I feel like I learned so much. And now taking this submission class, it's like another step in the storytelling, because starting to hear other people's statements, and you go, oh, wow. Yes, we're all theater artists. So we all go, oh, sitting in the dark in the theater. It's like, okay, yeah. So if you're reading 50 of those and everybody's saying that, where I really am starting to understand that the magic is about you and your experiences within the broad general experience all theater people have. Because theater people are reading your grant proposal or your submissions. 15 people are saying, the ghost light, I walked into the theater and saw the ghost light, and it was magic, and I knew I had to be in theater. And it's like, yeah. But what about you?
Right.
Like, we all have that feeling. That's why we're all in theater, which you kind of know broadly. But then when you really start reading and seeing other people's, that's very helpful for me to see other people's statements.
Yeah, you kind of have to throw away that first paragraph and cut to the chase and then take out all the flowery adjectives that, grant readers don't want to read. So you were then awarded this grant, which is so exciting. So you've been working on this now for almost a year, haven't you?
Absolutely. I don't really remember when it was awarded. Was it December? We'd have to look on the website. I don't remember. But that was a daunting part because I was so excited. And then I was like, ruh-roh. Like, I have to write a play. And where this grant is very different from other artists I know, like I have a friend in Illinois who's a weaver and has gotten several grants. She's had things she's had to do by certain dates. And for me, it was kind of like, you need to have a play by August 10th. See you then. I mean, not that they haven't been in touch, but I didn't have to like turn in scripts, or I didn't have to meet benchmarks. So all of that I had to create myself. So luckily, in my other life, I'm a coach and I have that skill, but it was overwhelming. And my first priority was to get an artistic team together so that I was not doing it alone, because that is overwhelming.
Right. Now, before we get too deep into the woods about the production of a play and your drafting and things like that, would you mind giving the listeners a synopsis of your play just so they have an idea what it's about?
I wouldn't mind at all. So it's called A Letter to My Soul. A lonely queer artist, untethered from history and searching for purpose, connects with the lingering spirit of a forgotten sapphic writer, still courted to the world, seeking one last chance to protect the stories she once dared to tell. Bound by a longing for connection, moon magic, and a shared companion, the two women navigate the space between past and present, anchoring in each other. They discover the parts of themselves needed to step into their next transformation. And I should add that they have a shared feline companion. So that's something.
Moon magic.
Moon magic, yes.
Tell us more about that.
I knew originally when I proposed it, the two women were just in two different countries. Like, I didn't really know where I was going. And eventually I decided that the older woman, who in the play is called Vic, was going to be dead. And I'm obsessed with the moon. And so I wanted the moon to somehow guide the structure of the play. I eventually decided on the full moon and then the waxing and waning. The waning and the waxing cycles are much longer, but I decided like the night before the full moon, and the night after. So we have 3 days in the play. And then the moon magic comes in because the feline companion, her name is Maxine. They are a non-binary cat. And Maxine is a descendant of the cat goddess Basset. So moon magic has been handed down to her and them. And they do all sorts of things to help. Because I was trying to figure out, how do these two women, how do I connect them? Especially if one's dead and one's alive. One's in the present in 2025. And that's when I was like, oh, there's a third character. It just came to me that it was a cat, because obviously cats have 9 lives. So Max could have been Max in one life and Maxine in another life. And, and there are lives in between that we don't really know about. But there was something special there for me.
That's so cool. And I do want to say to listeners, usually I know about Laura's work as it's being written. She'll say, oh, this character just started talking to me. And so I get to hear and read the different drafts that come along. And for this one, since it was commissioned, Laura asked me, she's like, do you want to know about this play as I'm working on it? Or do you want to be surprised when you see it performed? I was like, oh, that's really interesting, and I thought, well, let's try something different. I don't want to know about it until I'm sitting there seeing it. So it's been really challenging, and I don't think we'll do this again because...
No, I didn't like it.
But so I can't wait to see it on August 10th.
Yeah, but you're learning a lot. Like, she doesn't know a lot about it.
Yeah.
So.
Why did you ask that question? I'm just curious.
I don't know. I think probably because, I've always shared, and I think for me it was going to push me as a writer, too, not to have Chris as a sounding board constantly, and to really trust. And this particular project is really interesting to me, and I'm really curious to know where it's going to go when we're done with the grant, because I do want to expand it into a full-length play. So I don't know.
Yeah, but you learned that it is nice to, at the dinner table, to have someone to bounce things off of.
Oh my gosh. Yes.
So I have a question, and I'm not sure I don't remember the term, so if you don't remember the term, this question will not go anywhere. But when we were looking at the budget, there was a person that you put in on the budget as a budget line item. And this is one of the things I love about reading grants, is I get to learn things as well.
Dramaturg.
Can you tell listeners what a dramaturg is?
Yes. A dramaturg is kind of a broad term in theater, so it can be used for multiple things. In some capacities, a dramaturg can be used for more historical accuracy. So to make sure if I'm writing a play in the 1960s that what I'm saying is correct. It can also be somebody who helps you with structure of a play and really is kind of that sounding board for this is what I'm trying to do. Is this making sense? He's kind of a mirror to me. He reflects back a lot, and he'll go through, and he helped me with structure. After one of the first readings we had with actors, it was like, oh, this is it. Like we broke through the structure. Directors interpret the text on the page. So then they have a vision and they do the play. A dramaturg is helping you get what you want onto the page, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
So they're not putting their own interpretation on top. You're saying you want this or you want it to go that way, but what I'm reading is this. So that, you start to go, oh, I really thought that was on the page. And then they're going, that's not on the page at all. So they don't necessarily tell you how to solve it. They can help, but they reflect back what's actually going on so that you know where you are. Because particularly for me, and I know many playwrights don't have this problem, but I do. Plays get too big for me to hold the whole thing. So I need somebody else going like, you wanted to go here, but you're kind of weaving over there. So I find that really helpful.
Now, this is a one-time performance. It's a festival. It's a one-time performance. It's not a reading, though.
Correct. We are the first play or the first drama grant that has been what they consider a production, what I would consider kind of like a production light, because we're not in an actual theater. We're in the Arthur Murray Dance Studio. We will have lights, we will have sound, but it's just a different vibe. But the actors will be memorized. They will be blocked, which means moving in space, which is a little daunting because we have a week rehearsal. So it's been a long process. We've had 2 Zoom, like what we would call like table reads. And then we pushed to have 1 in-person workshop. And we had a 1-day workshop, which was a little insane. But it allowed us all to be in the same room and to really start building the room, which is a big thing in theater. Like you need energy in a room and a vulnerability. So I feel like we've kind of built that so that when we jump into rehearsals, everybody knows each other. We don't have to do all that stuff.
Very cool. And the rehearsals will be the whole week before the festival.
Yeah, we have about 20 hours. Wow. So it's not like long rehearsals. It's not full day rehearsals. We have 3 hours a night, Monday through Friday, and then we have a full day on Saturday, and then Sunday is the show.
Oh, I'm dying to ask this question, but if you don't want to answer it, and if you don't want it spoiled, Chris, you can take your headphones off. How are you going to represent the cat?
Absolutely. So the cat is being played by a person named Cassidy Phelps, who was also in my Christmas play, Miss Margaret's Barton Cottage Christmas Surprise. She played Lavinia, and they will be the cat. And this is a really interesting exercise because one of the biggest things I do not want in future, when this play hopefully gets published and is out in the world, I do not want people, doing Cats the Musical. I don't want them putting up people in unitards and leg warmers, and you don't want to hear, close your ears. We, definitely there are things with her hair that we'll do to look like ears. There is a tail involved, I'll say that. But she has what we are calling a feline earthy warrior vibe. So she kind of has a real badass vibe. And it's finding the groundedness, like where you can bring feline qualities into being a person in a way. So we have a really good vision. We hope we get there because we don't have a lot of time.
Yeah.
So you mentioned that you hope the play will be published and produced. What's the difference for listeners to understand, like, what does it mean for a play to be published? Like, we know your play Magpie was published during the pandemic.
Yes. It's challenging, honestly, particularly for emerging playwrights, because if you haven't had a big run first and a big development opportunity where you've gotten reviews and then more regional theaters and even community theaters want to do the work, it's challenging because even if you get it published, then people still don't know about it. So that's the hardest thing. And that's going to be the hardest thing about this. So if anybody out there is a reviewer, please come to my show, because that is really hard, like to get reviews. Even in the runs and other shows I've done, they want longer runs. They want 4, 5, 6 weeks so that they can have people come review and then send people to the show. And it's hard to get those runs when you're a newbie playwright.
It's so fascinating, these different artistic forms and what it takes and what the steps are to get things out into the world.
Well, playwriting is particularly challenging. I mean, I'm think all forms are challenging, but playwriting is hard. I mean, there are many different ways. Some people go through grad schools and MFA programs and then have contacts that way, but there's always the risk. I always think of Jen Lee speaking about how it's possible to have your voice flattened in those kind of programs, which I definitely have felt. And one of the reasons I went to the Dramatists Guild Institute was all of the teachers there are living playwrights, and I felt like they would take good care of me in that way because they understand the importance of voice. So it's challenging. But then once you're out, you're, particularly right now where the world is and all the funding that's being cut, big development things have been cut. So we have very few. So thousands and thousands of people. And now that it's not in your region, you're applying for this, people across the country are applying for it. They shut the doors after 200, 300 scripts. So it opens at 10 a.m. and they say it's going to go for a month and a half. But, by, 4 in the afternoon, it's already closed because people have gotten all their applications in. It's rough.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think it's important, getting back to that concept of the grant that we talked about and you getting some grant funds to produce this play. I have to admit, when I was early in the philanthropic game, which is over a dozen years ago now, if I had to look at a grant for a food bank and a grant for a theater, it was hard for me to not have some implicit bias about, we need to feed people before we need to entertain them. But if there's anything that the pandemic taught us, we all survived the pandemic in large part because there was art that we could participate in on some level.
Absolutely.
And art means whether you were reading a book, whether you were watching a movie, whether several plays hit Netflix and things like that. So we could all make it through that time. And it really helped me understand as a funder how important it is to fund art.
Art is life and death for many people. It is, I can't say it's as important as food, obviously. Like everyone should be fed and housed and clothed and all those things. Depending on who you are as an artist, we all have our own missions, but we're not only archiving our, for me, my little corner of the queer experience, but I'm also being a mirror. There are so many people out there who do not feel seen. Like I have never, ever seen myself on stage, period. Not on film, kind of on television. There's one thing but that's a big deal. And most people take it for granted that they see themselves all the time. So as artists, it's such an important role. And particularly in the time we're in right now, it's kind of a little bit echo of the AIDS pandemic, right? Like the artists were the ones who were actually capturing what was happening. And much of society was turning their back on what was happening. And we can look back at those plays now, Paula Vogel and so many others. I just think in that time period, there was Kushner, which was a little after the fact. He did Angels in America, the trilogy. Paula Vogel and Larry Kramer, who did A Normal Heart. They were capturing what was actually happening, even though people were being told it wasn't happening. So art is so important. And it's so funny because somebody in my submission class just also wrote, we also need entertainment. Like, exactly. And in the arts, we're also taught to be very elitist and that, there's certain things. And it's like, but entertainment itself is very important, you know?
Well, we're so grateful to you for working on another play and for coming by to tell us about it. Cannot wait to go see it. Reminder to listeners, it's August 10th in Guilford, Connecticut, right on the Guilford Green, which is a lovely place to come visit.
Yes.
The festival runs the entire week. So Laura's play is kicking off the festival and it goes through the 17th of August. The events are all free. We will put all of this information into the show notes. And we hope to see some of you there.
Yes.
And I just want to brag a little bit that 2 years ago when Laura had a reading of one of her plays, Years and Words, there at the festival, it was the most well-attended event of the whole festival. So I just want to put it out there that if you're coming, arrive early so you can get your seat. There are just about maybe 70 seats for this performance. And it's a one-time performance at this point.
Absolutely.
And it's free. So sadly, you cannot buy tickets in advance, but you can show up early.
Yes.
Best of luck, Laura. Break a leg.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Thanks for listening to The Book Cougars with Chris Wallach and Emily Fine. We'll be back again with another episode in 2 weeks. Until then, come chat with us on social media, Goodreads, or email us at bookcougars@gmail.com. If you'd like to help support our podcast, please tell others about us, leave a review wherever you listen, and consider becoming a patron. Even $1 a month is a big help. Learn more about that on our website, bookcougars.com, where you'll find the show notes for this and all of our past episodes.
Thanks, everybody.
This episode was edited by Pat Keogh Sound Design.